60% of the time, it works every time.
The Alien franchise invented a language of sci-fi horror, industrial claustrophobia, bio-nightmares, and silence as a weapon. Then it spent 4 decades arguing with itself about what made it scary, becoming the best and the worst of the genre, and sometimes in the same scene. It's a series of immaculate craft and self-inflicted wounds, and yet every time we think it's out of air, it finds a new way to crawl inside our heads. Case in point, the new Alien Earth. Watching it, I realized it's been more than 45 years since the first film. So much has mixed into the lore over time that I decided to rewatch the entire franchise to understand why we've ended up where we are. On that rewatch, one tiny choice in 1979 hit me anew, the decision that makes the Xenomorph terrifying. And the sequels, they kept rationalizing that terror away. And I'm going to unpack that and how the series' fixation on explaining the mystery blue holes in its own hull, and how recent entries tried to seal them without suffocating the vibe. So today, I'll hit each film fast but fair, kicking off with the fresh Alien Earth, then rewinding to where it all began to weigh today against the original blueprint, before moving through the rest. So strap in and enjoy.
Welcome to Earth.
So Alien Earth, a TV show prequel to a 45-year-old franchise that's been run into the ground more times than I can count. Yeah, this had disaster pretty much written all over it. But here we are. Alien Earth has landed some serious praise, with a lot of people calling it a bold new era for the franchise, and to be honest, I get it. This show looks like a full-blown prestige series with a budget that could probably buy a small moon. Showrunner Noah Hawley has come in swinging, clearly aiming for Game of Thrones level of quality. This thing feels ambitious, not just in its movie-level production, but in its storytelling. You can tell Hawley gets what makes Alien tick. But the most ambitious swing is how it tackles the Xenomorph problem. How do you make a creature scary again when everyone and their dog knows its entire life cycle? Well, you don't. You introduce new nightmares. This is where Alien Earth tries to restore that fear of the unknown that made the original so damn effective. Aesthetically, this show is a home run. They've deliberately channeled the look and feel of Scott's original film, perfectly preserving that blue-collar working stiffs in space vibe. The production design is almost identical to the original, right down to the old-school CRT monitors for the computers, which makes the world feel lived in and authentic, not like the slick, advanced tech we saw in Prometheus. But the best part? The Xenomorphs are largely played by actors in suits. It gives them that eerie, unsettling physicality of the original creature, a refreshing throwback in an era of weightless CGI monsters. Visually, this thing is just about everything you could want from a modern Alien project. But just because it looks right doesn't mean it is right. The second you start thinking about what you're watching, the whole thing begins to fall apart a little bit. For a show that nails the aesthetic, it introduces some questionable additions to the lore that create immediate inconsistencies. We've suddenly got cyborgs, synths, and hybrids running around, and with them comes advanced tech that creates massive logic problems for the rest of the timeline. A gun that can stun a Xeno? Warrior hybrid super soldiers? I guess that would have come in handy in the future films, wouldn't it? It's like the Holdo maneuver in The Last Jedi all over again. A cool moment that breaks the universe if you actually think about it for more than 5 seconds. It feels like the writers are just throwing everything at the wall, new alien species, cyborgs, a whole Earth setting, without stopping to think if it makes actual sense. It's set just 2 years before the first film, meaning the entire Alien on Earth premise is a paradox. It has to be contained and covered up, otherwise the crew of the Nostromo would know what they're walking into, which completely neuters the stakes. The script itself is a bit of a first draft mess. The plot is just monumentally stupid at times, asking us to believe 12-year-olds in robot bodies are fighting Xenos while actual soldiers are just there. The dialogue at times is even worse. Lazy, on-the-nose expedition where characters tell each other things they already know just for our benefit. We barely know who they are, so there's zero reason to care when they inevitably get torn apart. There's just not much character work here at all. And this all feeds into a massive tonal problem. The show can't really decide what it needs to be. One minute there's a Bad Bunny-esque rap track playing, the next it's heavy metal. It feels less like Alien and more like a generic teen slasher, with the Xenomorph stalking kids down a hallway before we suddenly get a bullet time sequence ripped straight from The Matrix. It's a bizarre genre mashup that completely betrays the slow burn horror of the original, and any sense of real suspense just gets lost in that noise. But that's enough of the lore overload. In 1979, one brutal choice made the Xenomorph terrifying, so let's see how the original builds fear.
You know, Bill, there's one thing I've learned in all my years. Sometimes you gotta say, what the fuck? Make your move.
So, 1979, Ridley Scott takes a B-movie pitch, essentially Jaws in space, and somehow turns it into an undisputed masterpiece of horror. This is the film that defined the entire sci-fi horror genre for decades to come. Alien is the gold standard that every sequel, prequel, and spin-off, including Alien Earth, has been desperately trying to live up to or foolishly trying to ignore. It's a masterclass in atmosphere and tension, and understanding why it works is a key to understanding why so many of the other films in this franchise just don't. Alien was a grimy, terrifying fusion of both sci-fi flick and a horror movie that nobody had seen before. The genius was in its realism. These guys were blue-collar truckers in space, exhausted, underpaid, and just trying to get home. This grounded approach made the horror feel intense, personal, and believable. The film also unleashed a new kind of terror with its body horror. There was this deeply unsettling sexual undercurrent to everything, from Giger's phallic nightmares to a parasitic pregnancy forced upon a male character. It was deeply disturbing on a primal level, and in the middle of it all, the film refuses to hand you a hero on a silver platter. For half the runtime, you have no idea who the main character is. Ripley only steps up out of necessity, making her one of the most iconic and earned protagonists in cinema history. Now, a lot of people call this movie slow, and yeah, they're right, but that's a goddamn feature. Alien weaponizes its pacing. Scott lets the silence and the dread hang in the air, building an almost unbearable sense of claustrophobia. The Nostromo is a greasy, clanking, industrial nightmare of narrow corridors and dripping pipes, a perfect cage for a perfect predator. The sound design is a character in of itself, the unsettling hum of the ship, the piercing shriek of the motion tracker, and most importantly, the chilling silence. Scott understood that what you don't see is infinitely scarier than what you do. The Xenomorph is kept in the shadows for most of the film, a fleeting glimpse of a tail here, a silhouette there. That's it. You feel its presence long before you ever get a good look at it. It's a slow, creeping dread that gets under your skin and stays there. And you can't talk about Alien without talking about H.R. Giger. The man birthed a biomechanical phantasmagoria that has haunted nightmares ever since. The Xenomorph, the derelict ship, the space jockey, it was all part of a cohesive, alien aesthetic that felt both ancient and terrifyingly new. Giger's work gave the film a visual language that was beautiful and repulsive at the same time. From the skeletal remains of the space jockey fused to his chair to the obscene fleshy design of the facehugger, every frame dripped with a unique, deeply disturbing artistry that has never been properly replicated. But here's the tiny choice that hits me and you. The film refuses to define the thing. No origin, no motive, no proper name, just behavior. Scott shoots it like a rumor. Glimpses, silhouettes, a hiss around the corner, and its biology as a weapon you only understand when it hurts you. Every sequel after that puts the monster on a whiteboard. Taxonomy, queens, engineers, hybrid variants, turning the unknown into trivia. But we'll get to that later in this video. Now, Alien 1979 of course was a smash hit. It won an Oscar for its visual effects and became a cultural phenomenon, but its real legacy is its influence. It became the DNA for countless sci-fi and horror films that followed. Everything in a confined space movie, from The Thing to Predator, owes Alien a check. It set the standard, it laid the foundation for the 80s slasher boom, and proved that sci-fi could be smart, gritty, and utterly terrifying. It's a legitimate cinematic landmark. Plain and simple. Now, for some people, this film might not be perfect, and I can understand that. The plot, when you boil it down, is dead simple. A monster gets on a ship and kills people one by one. That's it. And for a 2-hour movie, some could call that fairly slow, but not me. I love it. The measured pacing and that stripped down spine are exactly what make it work. They turn every footstep into a countdown and every shadow into a threat. Simplicity doesn't flatten this movie, it sharpens it. You're trapped with the unknown, and the unknown does the killing. It's one of those films you can't solve on a first watch. You can't outsmart it with genre literacy. And that makes it miles more interesting than most modern releases where 20 minutes in, you've already guessed the next twist and probably the ending too. So, back to Alien. One perfect predator becomes a hive, and fear straps on squad armor, and you have aliens.
On my mark. 5,
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2, 1. Mark.
So, how do you follow up a masterpiece of slow burn horror? Well, if you're James Cameron, you don't even try. You strap in, you weld a pulse rifle to its side and turn it into a high-octane action movie. Aliens is the sequel that, by all rights, should have been a disaster, but instead, it became one of the greatest action films ever made. But in doing so, it also planted the seeds for the franchise's biggest problem. It started explaining the monster. Now let's not beat around the bush here. Aliens was a juggernaut. It pulled in over $183 million on an $18.5 million budget. Critically and commercially, it was a home run, nabbing an Oscar for its visual effects and getting archived in the Library of Congress. But its real legacy is that it wrote the playbook on how to make a sequel that doesn't just rehash the original. James Cameron famously walked into a pitch meeting, wrote Alien on a board, added an S, and it turned into a $sign. That insane level of confidence is baked into every frame. It proved you could radically switch genres and not only succeed, but create something that, for many, actually surpasses the original. Cameron swaps the slow, creeping dread of the first film for pure kinetic warfare. He takes a squad of expendable, Vietnam-inspired grunts and throws them into a meat grinder. And it's a miracle of low-budget ingenuity. The film looks 10 times more expensive than it actually was. While respecting the first film, Aliens opens up the toy box and fundamentally expands the lore in ways that become franchise staples. We got the Colonial Marines, a bunch of cigar-chomping badasses with iconic gear who made the threat feel tangible. We got the term Xenomorph. We got the Power Loader, giving us one of the most badass final showdowns in movie history as Ripley goes full mama bear. And of course, the big one, the Alien Queen. The reveal of this towering egg-laying matriarch is a great moment. It recontextualizes the threat, turning a lone predator into an organized, terrifying hive. It's a good stroke of world building that gives the action a clear, monstrous objective. Kill the Queen, you kill the colony. It just works. For this movie. But this is where Aliens, for all its brilliance, begins to chip away at the original's horror. By introducing the Queen, it demystifies the creature. It takes this unknowable biomechanical horror and turns it into something we can understand, an insect colony. The monster now has a motive, protect the hive, which makes it slightly less terrifying. The fear of the unknown is replaced with the fear of being outnumbered. It's a trade-off that makes for a phenomenal action movie, but it's the first step in turning a Lovecraftian nightmare into just a big bug. Also, on rewatch, some of the logic frays at the edges. I have a question. How does a queen the size of a school bus sneak onto the dropship, let alone the Sulaco, without anyone noticing? Okay, it's a cool moment, so cool, I can forgive it, but still. The characters sometimes also make some baffling choices. Why in the hell would Ripley, after everything she went through with Ash and the company in the first film, trust the sleazy company man Burke for even 1 second? Her entire character is built on distrusting Weyland-yutani, yet she walks right into his obvious trap. Okay, but it's fair to forgive those little logic dings. The real slippery slope is stepping onto let's define the monster. Crowning a queen gives it motive and biology. Perfect for this movie, don't get me wrong. Risky for a franchise built on the unknown, however. James Cameron wisely stopped short of an origin lecture for now, but we'll see how that plays out later. First, the pendulum swings hard in the other direction.
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sorta good at something.
Alien 3 is the franchise's infamous problem child, a film that douses the fiery hope of its predecessor in acid and gives the audience the middle finger before the opening credits even roll. Director David Fincher was brought in to helm this famously troubled sequel, which immediately decides to kill off the two surviving characters we grew to love, and that's just the start. Now look, I'm not going to sit here and say it's all bad, but who am I kidding? It is all bad. The whole thing is set in a lice-infested penal colony full of violent religious zealots. Like, okay. For context, Sigourney Weaver fought for Ripley to die, wanting a definitive end, and you can feel that weight running through the film. She's not fighting for her humanity anymore. She's fighting for a dignified death, to make sure the thing inside her dies with her. It's a bleak, brave, honestly fitting end for her character, even if the film around her is a complete mess. Bishop's practical effects also deserve special mention. They are damn impressive. The animatronic model was state-of-the-art for its time, and it still looks shockingly good today. Even if some of the other effects looked a bit janky back then, the film's overall aesthetic was strong enough to snag an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects, so fair play to them. But that's basically it. The positives kind of end there. Killing Newt and Hicks off screen in the first 5 minutes is one of the worst creative calls in sequel history. It's an unforgivable slap in the face that completely undermines the emotional victory of Aliens. And Michael Biehn, who played Hicks in Aliens, was rightfully pissed. It sacrifices everything that made the last movie work for cheap shock value, and it doesn't stop there. The film introduces genuinely interesting characters like Clemens, played by the great Charles Dance, only to kill them off abruptly just as they're getting compelling. On top of that, it never even bothers to explain how a xenomorph egg got onto the Sulaco in the first place. It just happened because the script said so. It's just pathetic writing, really. The fact this movie even got made at all is kind of a story in of itself. The behind the scenes was a complete dumpster fire. Massive studio interference with executives constantly changing their minds. More than 10 writers, $13 million blown in development, and $7 million worth of sets left unused. The studio treated Fincher like an amateur, second-guessing his every move. He said no one hates this movie more than he does, and that he was fired 3 times and that he had to fight for every single decision. He's disowned it ever since, refusing to even record a commentary. After all that, the fix was to get weirder. Cloning, quips, and a shiny new tone, as if style could patch a broken script.
No, I don't know what I expected.
Set 200 years after Ripley's fiery death, Alien Resurrection is the franchise's bizarre attempt at a do-over. They bring her back as a clone, spliced with xenomorph DNA because apparently science in the future runs on bad fanfiction logic. The result is a film that's not quite horror, not quite comedy, but definitely an identity crisis. So did this Frankenstein monster of a sequel at least make money? Yeah, it did. On a budget of $75 million, it pulled in over $161 million worldwide. It wasn't a domestic smash hit, but internationally, it did well enough to justify its existence on a spreadsheet. Money talked. The entire premise here hinges on cloning Ripley to get the queen embryo inside her, a narrative handwave so lazy it's insulting. How do you clone a host and also perfectly replicate the separate organism inside? Just don't think about it. The writer sure as hell didn't. This genetic tampering creates a new Ripley who's part human, part Xeno, a concept that intrigued Weaver but plays out on screen with all the subtlety of a Looney Tunes cartoon. But the film's final, baffling mistake is the newborn. This human-Xeno hybrid, a sad-looking, fleshy puppet, is supposed to be the horrifying new threat. Instead, it's a pathetic creature the film bizarrely tries to make us sympathize with in the last 10 minutes before Ripley mercifully blows it out into space. It's not scary, it's just gross. And the crew of the Betty are a bunch of cartoon characters here. That's what you get when a script calls for quirky space pirates and leaves it at that. Expendable Characters 101. Winona Ryder's call feels like a petulant child that's about to throw a tantrum in every scene. A baffling piece of miscasting, to be honest. And while Sigourney Weaver is clearly having some fun with her new detached Ripley, you can't escape the fact they paid her $11 million to be here. The film fatally lacks the gravitas of actors like John Hurt or or Charles Dance. Director Jean-Pierre Jeunet brings his quirky European art house style, while writer Joss Whedon provides a script full of snarky B-movie quips. The two sensibilities clash into a bizarre tonal mess. 1 minute, it's a grotesque body horror film. The next, it's a slapstick action comedy. Whedon later complained the film was too jokey, but his script is full of one-liners. Jeunet, meanwhile, frames everything with a weird, almost goofy lens that drains any potential for real tension. There is a scene where Ripley plays basketball with a bunch of space bros and casually makes a no-look behind-the-back shot. It's a cool moment, but it feels like it's from a completely different movie. The film is too silly to be taken seriously as an alien movie, but not funny enough to work as a parody. It just sits in this awkward, cringy limbo, unsure of what it wants to be. It was one of the worst films of 1997. In the end, Resurrection is the moment the franchise became a full-blown parody of itself. It's an ugly, stupid, and cynical cash grab that treats its own lore as a joke. I saw it as the final nail in the coffin, a film so misguided it nearly destroyed the franchise for good. It's a messy, over-the-top, and often repulsive spectacle that acts like a tumor on the already damaged world of the first 3 films. A desperate attempt to keep a dying intellectual property profitable. And it would seem things couldn't get any worse, but wait, there was something else in store.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence, and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
After Resurrection drove the franchise into a ditch, they brought out the big guns, the crossover fans had been dreaming about since Predator 2. On paper, Alien vs. Predator is a slam dunk, 2 of cinema's greatest monsters finally facing off, but in reality, it's the moment the franchise officially traded horror for a Happy Meal toy. It was a desperate, cynical mashup that asked one question: how do we make this PG-13? But AVP printed money. By sanitizing the violence, they opened the floodgates to a wider audience, and it became a box office hit. Even James Cameron, who called the idea a middle finger to the franchise, admitted he kind of liked it. But box office success doesn't equal a good movie, a lesson this franchise was about to learn on repeat, as this was just the beginning. The script is a masterclass in how to waste a great concept. We were introduced to a team of human characters so bland and expendable they might as well be wearing red shirts. These are supposed to be top-tier scientists, but they have the survival instincts of a lemming in a blender, touching alien artifacts and ignoring every single warning they possibly can. It's the Prometheus school of running away from things before Prometheus even existed. The real crime is how it butchers the lore too, turning the predators into glorified big game hunters breeding xenos for sport. It simplifies 2 cosmic nightmares into a glorified dogfight, stripping away any mystery either species had left. But the film's cardinal sin is the PG-13 rating. This is a crossover between 2 of the most violent R-rated franchises in history, and they decided to sanitize it for the kids. The result is a bloodless, toothless mess. The iconic acid blood is just green goo, and the kills are shot in a way that's more suggestive than scary. Any attempt at the suspense of the original films is completely lost. It's not a horror movie, and it's barely a good action movie. It's a neutered product and fails to honor the legacy of either franchise, all for a bigger opening weekend. So AVP left a legacy of disappointment. It's this weird enigma, a film that gives you the monster fight you asked for, but in the most creatively bankrupt way imaginable. Worst of all, its success killed a potential Alien sequel from Ridley Scott and James Cameron. We traded a potential masterpiece for this. But here's the truly depressing part. As bad as this was, it was about to get so much worse. It set a new low only for its own sequel to immediately start digging.
You know what they say? Fool me once, strike one. But fool me twice, strike 3.
Aliens vs. Predator Requiem picks up literally seconds after AVP and finds a way to be worse in every single one of them. It takes the one cool concept its predecessor had, the Predalien, and builds a whole new category of cinematic garbage around it. It's an active assault on the senses and the legacy of 2 iconic franchises. I will give it this though. The Predalien hybrid was a genuinely exciting cliffhanger. The wolf predator acting as a cleaner, erasing all evidence, is a bit of mythology that actually does fit. But that's where the praise ends. This movie is a forgettable, joyless, and pointless slog. It's so bad, critics and fans were actually united for once in hating it. I saw a comment once saying, "I cursed this film to the devils," and honestly, same. The human characters are a black hole of charisma, played by actors so unknown they make the red shirts from Star Trek look like A-listers. There is no one to root for here, so you just end up watching random people get killed and you just don't care. Not that you can actually watch them get killed because the film is so dark you can't see a damn thing. And this isn't a joke. The directors intentionally underlit everything to the point of parody. It's like watching a radio play with occasional silhouettes bumping into each other. I've seen brighter caves than this movie. Genuinely. People complain they couldn't see anything on any screen they tried, and they were right. It's a deliberate choice that makes the action incomprehensible. And you have to wonder if they were just trying to hide how cheap everything else looked. When you do get a glimpse of the Predalien, however the hell you pronounce it, you almost wish you hadn't. The design is just goofy. It's got the Predator dreadlocks, but they just look silly on a Xeno. And its powers? It's completely overpowered. Evolving from a chestburster to a giant monster in minutes, and for some reason, it can just implant embryos directly into people, because why bother with established lore when you can just make shit up, I guess? And the rest of the plot is just a lazy copy-paste of better movies in the franchise. The wolf predator, supposedly an elite hunter, gets his ass handed to him and then starts killing random humans instead of the actual Xenos. It throws all logic out the window, ignoring incubation periods and basic character motivations. But after hitting rock bottom, the series yanks the wheel back to Ridley Scott. Less slasher, more origin seminar. Time for glyphs, black goo, and a franchise trying to explain itself.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
The hype for Prometheus was through the roof, a direct prequel to Alien, promising answers to the space jockey mystery and the origins of humanity. It felt like a fresh start, a return to the cerebral horror and prestige filmmaking of the original. But what we got was, well, a truly gorgeous, ambitious mess that left audiences scratching their heads more often than clutching their chests. It tried to redefine the Alien universe, and in doing so, created some of its biggest headaches. Now, say what you want about Prometheus, but you can't accuse it of lacking ambition. Scott swung for the fences, ditching the creature feature slasher vibe to ask the big questions. Where did we come from? Who created us? What happens when we meet our makers? So it was a deeply philosophical, almost theological sci-fi epic. The interplay between Shaw's unwavering faith and Holloway's cold atheism, or the unsettling agency of David the android, elevated it beyond typical franchise fare. It was a magnificent sci-fi film for those moments, genuinely intriguing in its exploration of humanity's origins and the perils of playing God. Visually, Prometheus is an absolute triumph. Every single frame is a masterpiece of design and cinematography. The spacecraft itself, the alien planet, the incredible sense of scale, it all looks breathtaking. Scott brought back that distinct H.R. Geiger aesthetic that had been sorely missing since the original, integrating it into the engineer's architecture and the proto-Xenomorph designs. The opening sequence alone, with those stunning landscapes and beautiful music, is a reminder of Scott's mastery. And for a 2012 film, the 3D was genuinely impressive, making it one of those rare blockbusters that actually justified the extra ticket price. It's an undeniably beautiful film and a testament to its production values. Now, despite the divided critical reception, Prometheus still printed money, pulling in over $400 million worldwide on a $130 million budget. So it was a box office success. But let's talk about lore. Lore that Prometheus decided to casually break. The terrifying mystery of the original was precisely that. The unknown. Prometheus stuffs it all into a neat little box, turning Lovecraftian horror into a biology lecture. We traded terrifying ambiguity for black goo that does whatever the plot needs it to do. Prometheus also creates massive technological inconsistencies, showcasing tech more advanced than what we'd seen in Alien, which of course was set decades later. It's an active disservice to the franchise's established rules, sacrificing mystery and consistency for unsatisfying answers. For all its grand philosophical questions, Prometheus ultimately delivers no answers. It's an empty bag of visual tricks, a film that gestures at intelligence but then undermines itself with utterly stupid characters. It wants to be a profound exploration of creation and belief, yet completely fails to deliver any genuine scares, turning cosmic horror into a pretentious lecture that just makes you want to turn your brain off. The pacing of Prometheus is another major stumble. It's front-loaded with world building and character introductions, too many characters in fact, making most of them utterly forgettable, and this deliberate slowness in the first half is a flaw, leading to a narrative that feels bloated and unfocused. It spends far too much time on unnecessary exposition that does little to serve the actual plot or build tension. Yes, Prometheus sets itself an ambitious goal, and I'll be honest, I was excited when I heard what it was aiming for, but the letdown is that it plays less like an expedition into a sinister origin myth and more like a biology lecture. It might have been far more compelling to push toward a Xenomorph homeworld and crack the door open just a sliver. Leave room to keep building rather than declaring them petri dish creations. And sure, a film isn't bad just because it didn't match my expectations. Agreed. It's not a total failure. There are undeniably powerful stretches, but come on. This is not how we pictured the birth of the alien, and in the process, it rips fresh, gaping holes in the franchise's lore.
What has that got to do with it?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
After Prometheus left us with a beautiful, pretentious, and logic-defying mess, Covenant was supposed to be the course correction. Ridley Scott clearly heard the complaints: not enough horror, too many dumb questions, not enough alien. So he smashed a slasher movie into his philosophical prequel, promising to bridge the gap and finally give us the answers we were waiting for. What we got was a film that doubled down on the horror. Alright, but also doubled down on the franchise's worst impulses too, creating a sequel that somehow managed to make the problems of Prometheus even worse. I'll give Scott this: when he wants to be scary, he still knows how. Covenant throws away the sterile labs of Prometheus and dives headfirst back into pure, visceral body horror. This movie is brutal. The Xenomorphs are genuinely terrifying additions. Pale, twitchy, and horrifically fast. Their backburster and mouthburster introductions are the stuff of nightmares. You can feel the film reveling in its R rating. With acid-splashed faces and torn limbs, it's a cynical and twisted spectacle that, at its best, recaptures that feeling of dread. For brief moments, this feels like an alien movie again, reminding you that before it was about lore and philosophy, it was about survival. If there is one reason to watch this movie, it's Michael Fassbender. His dual performance as the sinister David and the dutiful Walter is nothing short of phenomenal. He's the chilling, magnetic center of this entire chaotic mess. The best scenes in the film are just him talking to himself. The rest of the cast does their best with what they're given. Catherine Waterston makes a solid Ripley-esque hero, even if she's written to look like she's permanently on the verge of tears. And Danny McBride, stripped of his usual comedy, is surprisingly effective as the capable pilot Tennessee. They're a solid crew, they're just stuck in a terrible movie. Because here, Scott truly shoots his own franchise in the foot. Covenant commits the single most unforgivable sin in the series. It solves the mystery. The perfect organism, the cosmic nightmare that haunted our imaginations for decades. Turns out, David just cooked it up in his lab. This is without a doubt the single most controversial retcon in the franchise's history, and it's a disgrace. It strips the Xenomorph of all of its unknowable Lovecraftian terror and turns it into a pet project. As James Cameron said, he would never have made a movie that did that. It completely sidelines the engineers, replacing their terrifying Geiger-esque world with a dead city, and creates even more technological plot holes. Covenant desperately wants to be smart. It keeps the philosophical ponderings of Prometheus, but handles them with all the subtlety of a chestburster. The themes of creation, faith, and playing God are rehashed from better movies like Blade Runner, but here they feel clumsy and pretentious. The film stuffs itself with self-important backstory and heavy-handed symbolism, like using a man of faith to illustrate the dangers of false gods. It's a shallow lecture that feels completely at odds with the dumb slasher movie it actually is, leaving the film with a massive identity crisis. It's not smart enough to be profound, and not scary enough to be pure horror.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
So after the pretentious philosophy lesson of the prequels and the absolute embarrassment that was AVP, the franchise was basically a corpse on the operating table. The only move left was to go back to basics. Alien Romulus, a film that promised to ditch the lore dumps and just be a damn horror movie again, it's the franchise course correction we were all begging for, but it also proves that sometimes playing the hits is just a lazy way to avoid writing a new song. Let's be clear, aesthetically, Romulus is great. This is the most authentic the Alien universe has felt since 1986. Director Fede Alvarez gets it. He brings back that grimy, blue-collar truckers in space vibe that made the original a masterpiece. The production design is a love letter to the first two films, right down to the old-school CRT monitors. It feels lived in, it feels real, not like the Apple Store aesthetic from Prometheus. It's a visual feast, a deliberate and successful return to the claustrophobic, tense atmosphere that made us fall in love with the franchise in the first place. And they remembered that practical effects actually look good. In an era of weightless CGI monsters, Romulus shoves animatronics and creature suits front and center, and my god, does it make a difference. The Xenos have a real physicality. The miniatures used for the ships give the space sequences a tangible weight. And the facehuggers, they are more horrifying than ever, skittering around with a grotesque reality. It looks incredible. For a movie with a lean, mean $80 million budget, it looks a hell of a lot better than the slop Disney served up with The Acolyte for $180 million. It's no wonder critics have called this the third best film in the franchise and audiences flock to see it. On a technical and reception level, Romulus is an undeniable win. It proved you can still make a great Alien movie without a bloated budget or a convoluted plot. But for all its slavish devotion to the originals, Romulus has pretty much nothing new to say. It's a greatest hits album, a cover band playing the classics note for note, but to be fair, doing it well. It is very packed with fan service and callbacks that it forgets to have its own identity at times. Reusing dialogue, camera shots, and even a key character type played by the late great Ian Holm feels less like a tribute and more like spiritual theft. It's derivative to the point of being a little bit soulless, a checklist of member berries that's more interested in reminding you of better movies than being a great one itself. And for a film that tries so hard to get the vibe right, it gets the lore pretty wrong. The plot hinges on finding the wreckage of the Nostromo, a ship that was atomized at the end of the first film, so it just shouldn't be there. It's a lazy moment that insults anyone really paying attention. Then there's the alien's life cycle, which is now apparently on fast forward. A facehugger is ripped off and a chestburster pops out just minutes later. Again, a complete disregard for the established biology, all for the sake of a cheap jump scare. And tonally, while it nails the tension, it never quite reaches the level of true horror. The original was scary because of the unknown, the slow, creeping dread of a cosmic nightmare you couldn't comprehend. Romulus is tense, and it is gruesome, and it's got some great creature moments, but it's not really scary. Because you know the monster, you know the rules. The fear of the unknown is gone, replaced with the predictable beats of a slasher movie. At the end of the day though, the script is fine. It's not the dumpster fire of Resurrection or the logical black hole of Prometheus, but it's not truly great either. The dialogue is serviceable and the characters are smart enough to not feel like complete idiots, which is a low bar this franchise has failed to clear multiple times, so fair play to it for that. But it's all in service of a story that's fundamentally unoriginal. It's a well-made and entertaining and ultimately hollow echo of what came before. It's a safe bet when what this franchise really needed was a bold leap. So, what a ride. We've gone from a perfect, unknowable horror and a masterpiece of suspense to a full-blown bug hunt, then a nihilistic prison drama, a cartoonish clone saga, a PG-13 dumpster fire. We waded through the pretentious philosophy of the prequels and the greatest hits album of Romulus. This franchise has been a masterclass and a train wreck, a blueprint for greatness and a cautionary tale on how to fumble an iconic IP. It's a journey from legitimate art to a corporate product and back again. Sort of. At its peak, the Alien franchise is the absolute gold standard. It weaponized silence, weaponized shadows, and birthed a monster from our deepest primal fears without even needing to explain it. It showed us that sci-fi could be grimy and utterly terrifying with characters that felt real and stakes that felt earned. When it trusts its audience and embraces the unknown, it's legitimate capital A art that gets under your skin and stays there. That's why we keep coming back for more punishment. But at its worst, it's a blueprint for how to kill a golden goose. It's a franchise so obsessed with explaining its own magic that it performs an autopsy on it, turning cosmic horror into a boring biology lecture. It's a parade of stupid characters making illogical decisions, lazy retcons that break the universe, and cynical cash grabs that disrespect the audience and the source material in equal measure. It's everything wrong with Hollywood sequels, a soulless corporate machine strip mining a masterpiece for parts until there's nothing left but nostalgia fumes. That's the paradox of Alien. It's a perfect predator of a film that spawned a messy, self-devouring franchise. It's a constant battle between visionary horror and studio-mandated nonsense. So, what did you think of the Alien franchise? Is Alien Earth a return to form or another misstep? Did you like Romulus? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this.